Good morning, CWA. On behalf of District 1 Vice President Dennis Traynor, it is a great honor for me to have the opportunity to introduce our next speaker, the Chairman of the House Democratic Caucus, Hakeem Jeffries, who comes from my home borough of Brooklyn, New York. Now, those of us from District 1, and especially those of us from New York, have had the opportunity to see Congressman Jeffries in action over the last few decades, and we know what he is capable of doing. Over a decade ago, he was the first sponsor of the New York State Call Center Bill in the New York State Assembly, which was passed by the Assembly year after year until finally, in 2019, we took back the State Senate for the Republicans and made the Call Center Bill law. When we were organizing Cablevision, then Assemblymember Jeffries came to any meeting we asked him to come to, any picket line, any rally, to encourage those workers to join the union and stand strong for 4 years until they got a contract. And when we went on strike at Verizon, he was on our picket lines, he was at our rallies, he stood with us all the way. And now, as chair of the House Democratic Caucus, we know that not only will he sponsor and vote for pro-worker legislation, he'll be advocating day in and day out to make sure that the House moves forward on our key legislative priorities. There's no doubt that having Congressman Hakeem Jeffries as the chair of the House Democratic Caucus is a big part of the reason that the PRO Act was among the first bills passed by this House, that the American Rescue Plan and the infrastructure bill did so much to support CWA members' jobs and more. And he certainly continues the fight every single day to try and move our agenda forward. It is with great pleasure that I ask you to join me in welcoming Representative Hakeem Jeffries from Brooklyn, New York.
Is CWA in the House right now? Is union power in the House right now? What an honor and a privilege to be with each and every one of you, and certainly as 1109 and 1180 take to the stage, appreciate Tony and Gloria and their leadership and the members who are standing behind me. Thank you, Bob, for that very generous introduction. You've been such a leader for the folks back at home and now across the nation, standing up for working class individuals, organized labor, such a visionary and strategic thinker. And of course to our president, Chris Shelton, who I know from our days back in New York when I was first starting out, thankful for Chris's leadership on the national stage. To Sarah, of course, appreciate her, Dennis, and the whole CWA family. You've been with me from the very beginning of my journey. District 1, in fact, was the first union to endorse me when I was running for the Assembly in 2006, ultimately winning the first elected office that I hold. And so I thank you for being with me every step of the way. I'll never forget it. Now, I know there's a whole host of speakers who are scheduled to be before you today, and so I'm going to try to follow the advice of a former Sunday school teacher of mine. I grew up in the Cornerstone Baptist Church back at home in Bedford-Stuyvesant, and she said to me, this teacher of mine, she said, "Jeffries, on the question of public speaking, be brief, be bright, and be gone." And so I'm going to stand before you briefly and try to be as thoughtful as I can, and then step out of your way. But union organizing, the union movement, organized labor, it's it's in my blood. I grew up in a union household, two public employees who worked in that capacity their entire lives. But it was interesting, a little later on in life for me, and I remember talking to my mom and dad about when they first started out. They got married in 1967, and as newlyweds, at the time they were both members of the Social Service Employees Union at the time, SSEU. And shortly after they got married, the union went out on strike, fighting for better wages, better health care, better benefits. That's what CWA, that's what organized labor does. The union went out on strike. They had an interesting decision to make. They could either stand with their brothers and sisters on the picket line, not knowing where their income or their food or their shelter might come from during that particular moment, or they could cross that picket line for whatever temporary selfish reasons might have been tempting. I'm proud when I talk to my parents about what they did, that they stood on that picket line with their union brothers and sisters until that fight was won for better wages, better health care, and better benefits. And you know, I've thought about that. I'm so glad that they did, because when I think about how organized labor, how the movement has been there, the impact that it's had on me and my family. In 1973, my younger brother, he's doing well right now, but 1973, my younger brother was born with a serious heart condition. And it was that union negotiated health care that helped our family make it through that difficult moment. And then about a decade later or so, my parents bought their first and only home, the home in a working class neighborhood in Crown Heights that they continue to live in right now, the home where my brother and I were raised. And they were able to purchase that home and pay off the mortgage because of their union negotiated salary. And then I said to myself, about a decade after that, we were able to graduate a few years ahead of my brother, and then he graduated, and somehow, even though my parents made this modest living, we were able to graduate free of any loans. And I had no idea how my parents were able to pull it off. And then I asked my mother one day, I said, how was it possible that you were able to make this happen for myself and for my younger brother? She said, well, it was easy. I just borrowed against my union negotiated pension to make sure that my two sons would have no debt when they were starting their life. So I stopped by to make it clear that you don't ever have to worry about whether Hakeem Jeffries is going to stand with organized labor, because organized labor has always been there for me. And we're going to make sure that you and CWA and organized labor can continue to be there for working families all across America. That's what CWA is all about. That's what unions are all about. That's what organized labor is all about. And so we're thankful for you. What CWA, what this union movement represents. We share each other's values during an extraordinarily difficult time. Grave differences between what we're about and what some of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle are all about. We're trying to move the country forward. They want to turn back the clock. We're working hard to bring people together. They are tearing us apart. We fight for the people. They fight for the privileged few. We're all about the public interest. They're all about the special interests. We fight for the least, the lost, and the left behind. They fight for the wealthy, the well-off, and the well-connected. We believe in a strong social safety net, programs like Social Security and Medicare and the Affordable Care Act. They want to take those things away. We believe in Roe v. Wade and and a woman's freedom to make her own health care decisions. And they want to criminalize abortion and health care in America. We believe in unions and the right to collectively bargain. They want to destroy your freedom to negotiate. But here's a news flash straight out of Brooklyn. Democrats will protect the right to organize today. Democrats will protect the right to organize tomorrow. Democrats will protect your right to organize forever. That's in our DNA. That's what we're all about. And we're going to continue fighting until the Protect the Right to Organize Act gets through the Senate and to the president's desk. Thankful for this president, the most union-friendly president in modern American history. That's Joe Biden. That's what his record is. And we have big challenges in America, and we're continuing to work on those challenges, of course, related to inflationary pressures and high gas prices. But let's not lose sight of what has been accomplished. Under this president's leadership, we passed the American Rescue Plan without a single vote from the other side. The economy was on the brink of collapse. We were on the verge of another great recession or worse. And then with President Biden's leadership, Democrats in the House and the Senate, we stepped in to rescue the economy, make sure state and local governments didn't collapse, stood up a public health infrastructure at a time when there were less than 2 million Americans who were fully vaccinated in this country. Today, more than 225 million Americans. A public health infrastructure that has helped us gather in places like this, fight through the Delta variant, fight through the Omicron variant, fight through the BA2 variant, and continue to march toward normalcy. Enact a child tax credit that reduced child poverty in America during the last 6 months of 2021 by almost half, and has created an economy where 8.7 million good-paying jobs have come in to line since President Biden took office, a record for a similar period of time in American history. Low unemployment, 3.6%. Wages finally on the way up. More to be done, but an incredible foundation laid by President Biden and Democrats in the House and in the Senate. Let's not lose sight of that in partnership with you, CWA, and our friends in organized labor to get big things done. And then, of course, we moved on to passing the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, the most significant investment in infrastructure in the United States of America since President Eisenhower was in this town in the 1950s. For decades since then, it seems like it was Infrastructure Week here in Washington, D.C., every other week, but nothing ever got done until Joe Biden came to town. We passed this historic infrastructure agreement. We'll create millions of good-paying jobs. Those will be jobs that provide a living wage, a strong wage, a union wage. And we're going to make sure, particularly as it relates to the $40+ billion investment in broadband, that those are jobs that CWA workers will be able to serve at, because that is going to be the way to bring it to life for the good of all Americans. The American Rescue Plan, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, but of course, a continuing fight, Chris, to preserve our democracy. Democracy which is fragile. Democracy which is not self-executing. Democracy which all of us, as your presence here in Washington represents, we're going to have to continue to lean into. You know, I'll end with this observation. I was on the floor of the House of Representatives on January 6th, that fateful day. As Bob mentioned, I have the honor of serving as chair of the House Democratic Caucus, and so I was seated in the leadership section, very close to Steny Hoyer and Jim Clyburn as chair, that puts me as number 5 in the leadership structure. So it was a great honor to be able to sit with them as we were debating the so-called objections to the state of Arizona. And I'll never forget that moment, because as the debate was unfolding and Speaker Pelosi was at the rostrum, the Sergeant-at-Arms interrupts the debate and says that the mob has breached the Capitol. They're on the 2nd floor, a few steps outside of the House chamber. Be prepared to hit the ground and secure the gas masks that are underneath your seats. Now, Bob knows I had been in the House of Representatives at that point for about 8 years. I got to be honest, y'all. I had no idea there were gas masks underneath each and every seat. And so I knew this wasn't just a fire drill. This was a serious situation. And then I see Speaker Pelosi almost violently removed by her security team from the rostrum. And as I mentioned, I'm seated in the leadership section, and I see Steny Hoyer removed, our great majority leader, by our security team. And then I see Jim Clyburn, Steny's the number 2. See Jim Clyburn removed, the majority whip, by the security team. Number 4 Democrat Catherine Clark, my good friend, the assistant speaker, she was off campus that day. And so I'm there, and I see the speaker, she's number 1, she's removed. I see the majority leader, Steny Hoyer, he's number 2, removed. I see Jim Clyburn, our great majority whip, the security team came up to him and said, "Sir, you have to leave now." Number 4 Democrat, Catherine Clark, she was off site. I got to be honest, y'all, I'm sitting there as the number 5 Democrat. I was waiting for somebody to come get me. But Tony, they never came. I said to myself, it's a good thing I'm from Brooklyn. We've got to be prepared to fight for our democracy. And I say that to say the most important thing that happened that day was not that Democrats were run off, that the members of Congress run off the floor of the House of Representatives. That was not the most important thing that happened that day. The most important thing that happened occurred later on that day. The resilience of the American people that we tried to check. We came back to the Capitol. We completed our work. We certified the election, and we made sure that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris would become the President and Vice President of the United States of America so he could execute upon a union-friendly agenda, work closely with all of us to make life better for everyday Americans, and continue our country's long, necessary, and majestic march toward a more perfect union. God bless you, God bless CWA, and God bless the United States of America.
I know when Bob introduced Congressman Jeffries, he told you about his help in Cablevision organizing. And, you know, the truth is, and I don't know what Bob said, but the truth is that, you know, he was running for office at the time and he could have wished us well and sat on his ass and did nothing. But that's not what he did. That's absolutely not what he did. He fought alongside us every single step of the way against one of the richest pieces of garbage in New York that owns the Knicks and Madison Square Garden, and you name it, he owns part of it. And Hakeem had the absolute audacity to stand up and say, "I'm with you guys." So if any of you, and I know a lot of them up here, if any of you live in Brooklyn, and you're not voting for Hakeem Jeffries, I got one word for you. Move.
Appreciate you, brother.